From the comfortable studios of Podcast Detroit, this is an update edition of your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson, sharing what to know and where to go here in spring-like Southeast Michigan. Let's do it to it, shall we?
The City of Detroit's Office of Inspector General has launched an investigation into whether Mayor Mike Duggan or any city officials abused their authority by providing preferential treatment to a local charity. The nonprofit Make Your Date focuses on reducing preterm births in the city, a leading cause of infant mortality. Detroit's infant mortality rate is just over 13 deaths for every 1,000 births. That's double the state rate.
This investigation was prompted by a Detroit Free Press report last week. It showed an email obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. In it, a top Duggan aide says the city's chief development officer was tasked with launching a large-scale fundraising effort on behalf of Make Your Date, which is headed by Dr. Sonia Hassan.
A wrinkle in this? A private investigator spotted Mayor Duggan arriving at the same suburban house as Dr. Hassan multiple times last year without his personal protection staff. That investigator was working on behalf of Robert Carmack, who is currently facing 4 felony counts on allegations that he sold property he didn't own to the city. Back to Make Your Date. It seems that the city's fundraising effort never launched and was eventually led by Wayne State. It raised about $1.5 million. Both the city and university reacted swiftly to the news of investigation. The city called the Freep's report, quote, completely false in a statement. Wayne State pushed back as well, saying that Make Your Date was operated not as a separate nonprofit, but as a program administered by the university. Wayne State further says it has provided a detailed financial accounting. It says that Dr. Hassan, an employee of the university, was a volunteer running Make Your Date, so she had no personal financial benefit. The Duggan administration has been actively pursuing grants and funding for what it calls priority programs, acquiring more than $700 million in outside money over the last 3 years. The question at the root of this is, especially if Dr. Hassan didn't personally profit from this, should the city pick winners and losers among nonprofits?
All right, Jer, let's talk about this. I know you got some thinks.
Well, the wrinkle of a possible affair or sleeping with someone other than his wife, well, that's most Detroit mayors I can think of, if you're honest.
Right, and that's the speculation we should make clear. We don't know anything that anybody else does.
They showed up at the same house
without the mayor's security detail, which
at the same time
certainly looks fishy.
They could have been playing euchre.
Or Pokemon.
But Young, Kwame, Jerome Kavanaugh back in the day, I mean, you name it. And people like to gossip about this kind of stuff, but when it comes to when the rubber hits the road, people don't really care.
About politicians sleeping with other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Except when they do. I mean, we should point out, Bill Clinton almost lost his presidency to an affair. Donald Trump could well lose his at the end of the day because of an affair that he allegedly tried to cover up too.
That's true, but he did get elected when everyone knew he was doing it.
That's true.
And it's not really a material issue, like an issue that matters as far as the public interest, unless there is, say, a funneling of tax dollars for profit or grift or something like that. The question this raises is, should the city be involved in raising money for outside nonprofits? Apparently not many other cities do this, but Duggan has been really, really effective with this.
Yeah, Duggan, of course, has been really popular in the Detroit business community, very good at raising money, and a lot of business leaders, frankly, have kind of returned the favors for him.
Here's the one thing about this that gets me. Refusing to be interviewed by the paper, it makes people more suspicious. I mean,
as both Duggan and Dr. Hassan did with the Free Press report.
Man, I know it's a PR tactic to stonewall, but I don't get it.
It doesn't work. It doesn't look good. No, for sure. Detroit has received $250 million in federal money to demolish abandoned houses, but a federal investigation is revealing problems. The first 2 criminal charges have been levied in that investigation. Both defendants were employees of the Adamo Group. One went on to work for the city's building authority. New Baltimore resident Anthony Daguano is accused of pocketing $372,000 in bribes to steer contracts to other contractors. Meanwhile, Ardondo Haskins is accused of providing confidential information to other contractors so they could bid lower than the competition and taking more than $25,000 in bribe money. Since the investigation began, 2 contractors have been suspended and 1 was removed from working on demolitions.
Ford CEO Jim Hackett says self-driving cars have been overhyped and overpromised. Hackett appeared today at a Detroit Economic Club luncheon at Ford Field. Bloomberg quotes him as saying, quote, "We overestimated the arrival of autonomous vehicles," end quote. Ford still plans to introduce its first self-driving car in 2021, but Hackett says its applications will be limited because the problem is so complex. Ford recently entered into talks with rival automaker Volkswagen about sharing pickup truck platforms and commercial vans, and jointly developing electric and self-driving vehicles. The company recently opened an office in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood, where its team Edison works on electric and autonomous vehicles and business strategy.
So it's kind of refreshing, I have to say, to hear the head of a major automaker acknowledge that self-driving vehicles are not as close as most of them would have you believe. I think we've seen abundant examples of that. Especially last year, there was the well-publicized pedestrian fatality, a self-driving Uber. It was a Volvo fitted with Uber self-driving technology, struck and killed a pedestrian in Arizona. We had Glenn Stevens from Mish Auto on the podcast just last week, I think, right? And he talked about, he basically says, I think it's a lot farther away than a lot of automakers are acknowledging. This stuff is really complicated, and it's just not the kind of thing that we as a society want to rush into before the technology is really ready for prime time, because you're talking about people's lives.
Well, I'm not sure we're societally ready for this. I mean, when we put stuff out there about autonomous vehicles, sure, you get a lot of people who are saying, oh, take the wheel. But I mean, driving is something that a lot of people love to do. And then you think about the other side of that is you open up a Pandora's box of questions. So if cars are self-driving, who carries the insurance?
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting. I do some auto writing on the side, and I've talked to other auto writers as well who report the same things, that people don't click on stories about autonomous vehicles, which I find really fascinating, and it really begs the question of who's really driving this? Is it consumers or is it Wall Street? I think it's the latter.
From a regional business perspective, though, I kind of worry if it's something where there isn't that promise of autonomous technology. What does that mean for the stock market? What does that mean for investment? What does that mean for new projects if this thing is many more years out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Meanwhile, here's an even farther out concept for you: flying cars. Plenty of startups are working on them, believe it or not. So are automakers, including Toyota, Aston Martin, Audi, and even Porsche. So is Ford, which awarded a grant to the University of Michigan's Center for Sustainable Systems to study the environmental impact of so-called vertical takeoff and landing aircrafts. The researchers described their findings in a study published Tuesday in Nature Communications. The researchers say flying cars are efficient when cruising, but they use lots of energy for takeoff and climbing. Using a 100-kilometer point-to-point trip with a single pilot, they calculate that flying cars emit less greenhouse gas emissions than a standard gasoline combustion vehicle, but more than an electric vehicle. When flying cars are loaded with 3 passengers, however, greenhouse gas emissions were lower than internal combustion engine-powered cars and just slightly lower than electric vehicles. Overall, the researchers suggest that flying cars could be more environmentally friendly on longer trips than on short ones. According to the Detroit News, the study used publicly available information from companies that have developed flying car prototypes.
The Daily Detroit podcast is brought to you, by people like you. If you like what we're doing, join us as a member at dailydetroit.com/join.
City of Detroit has been on a bike lane building frenzy in recent years and now has nearly 240 miles of them. That's up from 13 miles back in 2007. The city's traffic engineering division recently updated its map of bike lanes to include planned protected bike lanes on Trumbull and Joseph Campo Avenue. It also shows the 26-mile Joe Louis Greenway, the project formerly known as the Inner Circle Greenway that is still cobbling together funding. That project will eventually form a loop that connects downtown to Hamtramck, Highland Park, Livernois Avenue, and Southwest Detroit. Curb Detroit also notes that the city is set to begin streetscape projects this summer that'll include sidewalk-level bike lanes on the Livernois Avenue of Fashion area and two-way cycle tracks on McNichols and Joseph Campo. The city last year added protected bike lanes along East Jefferson that connect downtown to the city limits with Grosse Pointe Park. It's a pretty cool map, and we'll include a link for you in the show notes.
As we reported yesterday on DailyDetroit.com, a Chicago-based fried chicken and fish eatery will hold a pop-up this weekend in Hazel Park. Parsons Chicken and Fish will head to Frame Friday and Saturday for special dinners with executive chef Hunter Moore. On the menu are items including ceviche tostadas, Parsons hot chicken, Friday fish fry with mashed potatoes and gravy, apple fritters, and Parsons' signature original frozen Negroni Slushes. Sign me up.
Yeah, color me interested on that last one there.
For sure. We've got more information and all the relevant links up on DailyDetroit.com. So Sven, I was a nerd today.
Yeah, I will. Tell me more.
So here's the deal.
And how's that different than any other day, by the way?
It's pretty much every day, right? So got into my history nerdery. Let's do that. History nerd today. Turns out that a downtown building was key to building the atomic bomb.
Whoa.
I had no idea about this, so I went down the rabbit hole and did a post up on the site, DailyDetroit.com, all about this. And here's the kicker. Bumpy cakes and atomic bombs came out of the same building.
Ooh, that's creepy.
With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thanks for listening, and be sure to come back tomorrow.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.